Today, we're diving into one of the most fundamental processes in all of biology. It's the metabolic engine that's firing up nearly every living cell on the planet, including every single one of yours right now. It's called glycolysis. So, have you ever really stopped to think about how that sugar in your coffee, or the carbs in a cookie, can almost instantly fuel your thoughts and actions? I mean, how does your body turn that simple molecule into raw, usable energy? Well, the answer lies in this elegant 10-step chemical dance, and we're about to break down every single move.
And that process is glycolysis. The name literally means sugar splitting, and it is the universal pathway that every one of your cells uses to squeeze energy out of glucose. It doesn't matter if you're sprinting flat out or sound asleep, with or without oxygen, this is always step one for energy production.
Ready to jump in? Here's our game plan. We'll start with the basics, then we'll see how the cell cleverly has to invest a little energy to get a huge return. After that, we'll uncover the master controls that keep the whole system in perfect balance, explore what happens when this delicate process goes wrong, and finally, I'll show you where glycolysis pops up in some truly unexpected parts of your daily life.
All right, let's get into it. First up, what exactly is this universal energy engine? Let's get the core concepts down.
Okay, so here's the bottom line. Glucose is the go-to fuel for your body. Glycolysis is the process that unlocks its energy, which comes in the form of a molecule called ATP. What's incredible is that it can do this with or without oxygen, making it super versatile. Now, this process isn't just a free-for-all. It's tightly controlled at 3 key steps that are totally irreversible. Think of them like one-way doors, and the master controller of them all is a fascinating enzyme called PFK1. You can think of it as the main traffic cop for this entire highway, and we're going to get to know it a lot better in just a bit.
Okay, let's keep building on this. Now, it might sound a little strange, but to actually get energy out of glucose, the cell has to spend some first. You know the saying, you have to spend money to make money? Well, that's exactly what's happening here, just on a tiny molecular level.
Look, we can break this whole 10-step pathway down into 2 simple phases. First up is the energy investment phase. Here, the cell uses 2 of its ATP energy coins just to get the glucose molecule ready for the main event. Then comes the energy payoff phase. That prepared molecule gets split and converted, generating a whopping 4 ATPs. So, you spend 2, you make 4, that's a net profit of 2 ATP molecules for the cell. Not a bad return on investment, right?
Okay, so let's zoom right into that energy investment phase. It all kicks off with the very first irreversible step, trapping the glucose inside the cell so it literally cannot escape. And to do this, the body has 2 different specialists for the job, depending on where this is all happening, hexokinase or glucokinase.
Now, this is where it gets really cool, how these 2 enzymes are perfectly tailored for their jobs. Think of hexokinase as being super sticky for glucose. It has a high affinity, which just means it can grab glucose even when there's not much of it floating around. This is super important for tissues like your brain that need fuel constantly. Glucokinase, on the other hand, is way less sticky. It has a low affinity. It only really kicks into high gear when there's a flood of sugar, like right after a big meal. This lets it act as a sensor, telling the liver to store the extra sugar and the pancreas to release insulin.
And this just brilliantly shows what happens when that sensor breaks down. There's a rare genetic condition called MODY2, where the glucokinase enzyme in the pancreas is just faulty. The body can't properly sense high blood sugar after a meal, so it doesn't release the right amount of insulin. It's a direct clinical consequence of a single broken part in this crucial first step, and it really shows why having the right enzyme in the right place is so critical for our health.
Okay, that brings us perfectly to our next big question, regulation. How does the cell control the flow of this entire pathway? How does it speed it up or slow it down based on what it needs at any given moment? Well, it all comes down to a master switch.
Meet phosphofructokinase 1, or PFK1 for short. If you remember one enzyme from this whole thing, make it this one. This is the enzyme that handles the main, committed step of glycolysis. Once PFK1 does its thing, there is no turning back. That glucose molecule is locked in to finishing the pathway. And because of that, it's the most important control point of them all.
So, how does the cell control this master switch? Well, it's all about supply and demand. Just think of a car's accelerator and its brake. When the cell's energy is running low, this little signal molecule called AMP starts to build up. You can think of AMP as the cell's low fuel light. It slams the accelerator on PFK1, basically screaming, "Go! We need more energy!" On the flip side, if the cell is swimming in energy in the form of ATP, or if it has other fuel sources like citrate from breaking down fat, these molecules hit the brake, telling PFK1 to slow right down because the cell is already topped up.
And this control isn't just happening inside one cell. Your whole body gets in on the action using hormones. Right after you eat a meal, insulin gets released, which basically tells your liver, hey, step on the gas, let's process all this sugar coming in. But when you're fasting, glucagon hits the brakes, telling the liver to slow glycolysis down and save that precious glucose for other tissues that need it more.
So we've seen this pathway as elegant and very tightly controlled. But what happens when it goes wrong? That's what we're looking at next: poisons, genetic defects, and disease.
Let's start with a really classic poison, arsenate. And this quote here just reveals how sneaky it is. See, arsenate doesn't actually stop glycolysis. Oh no, it lets the whole pathway keep running, but it secretly sabotages one of the most critical energy-producing steps. And this is the devastating result. By sneaking in and taking the place of a molecule called phosphate, arsenate tricks the cell into completely skipping an ATP-generating step. So the pathway runs, it finishes, but the net energy gain, a big fat zero. The cell burns through its fuel, but gets absolutely nothing back. It's the ultimate metabolic betrayal, and it leads to complete energy starvation for the cell. Now, besides poisons, there are also genetic defects, and the most common one actually affects the very last enzyme in the whole pathway, called pyruvate kinase. So in this disorder, that final energy payoff step is just broken. Now, for your red blood cells, which rely only on glycolysis for energy, this is a catastrophe. Without that ATP, their internal pumps fail, they start to swell up, and then they literally burst. This causes a condition known as hemolytic anemia. And because that final step is blocked, all the molecules from earlier in the pathway start to pile up behind it, creating this massive metabolic traffic jam. And that backup, that's actually one of the key clues doctors use to diagnose the condition.
All right, for our last section, let's bring all of this back to your everyday life, because you'll find the fingerprints of glycolysis in some really unexpected places. We're talking cancer, exercise, and even your teeth.
First thing to know is that there are kind of two versions of this process. You've got aerobic glycolysis, which happens when there's plenty of oxygen around. It ends by producing pyruvate, which then goes to the mitochondria to generate massive amounts of energy. But when oxygen is scarce, or in cells that don't even have mitochondria, like our red blood cells, the pathway takes a different exit. That's anaerobic glycolysis. It's way faster, but less efficient, and it ends with a different product, lactate. And this anaerobic pathway is where we find some of the most surprising connections. And this is where it gets really wild. So cancer cells, they famously hijack this anaerobic pathway to fuel their crazy fast growth. It's a phenomenon called the Warburg effect. That burning feeling you get in your muscles during a tough workout? Yep, that's lactate from anaerobic glycolysis. And get this, ever wonder how the fluoride in your toothpaste actually works? It's all glycolysis. Fluoride is basically a poison for a specific glycolytic enzyme in the bacteria living in your mouth. It shuts their energy production line down cold, preventing them from making the acid that causes cavities. It's literally biochemistry in your bathroom. So from fueling your brain in real time, to the fight against cancer, to preventing cavities, glycolysis is this central ancient pathway that's just woven into the very fabric of life and disease. It really makes you wonder, right? As we get better and better at understanding it, what more could we achieve by truly mastering its control?